Greetings, fellow travelers. Welcome to the 80th episode of the RPG Cave. I'm one of your hosts, the level 99 human archmage Ryan Turford, and I am joined, as always, by the returning level 99 elf medic, Mr. Garret Bland. Garret, how are you doing on this lovely, lovely Monday evening, good sir? It also feels kind of weird because I just did this show a couple days ago with Matt from the PlayStation Drive.
Yeah.
So kind of back-to-back episodes, but how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm back from Hawaii. It was very nice.
Oh, that's awesome.
On the trip. A little mini vacation before a lot of career switch and job switch and life changing stuff happened. So it was very nice and relaxing. Now I'm back to work and back to the grind.
Yeah.
The crunch.
Back to the grind. Typical Monday over in
typical Monday.
Yeah.
Yes. How about you?
That's good. You know, I'm doing well. I'm doing so well, Garret, because I'm actually wearing a hat for the first time in like almost a month.
That's true.
At this point, because I had to. So folks at home may not know this, but we had to have some maintenance done in our apartment pretty recently, and part of that maintenance involved me having to get rid of all my hats as well as other pieces of clothing.
Oh.
So I haven't actually had any hats for a while. So this is actually my first time wearing a hat in a very, very long time, which is kind of nice.
Well, it was first time back, and it's always welcome.
Yeah.
I noticed it. I was like, wait, he's not wearing a hat today, and I'm just like, oh, there you go.
Yeah.
This week.
Although
do you do a rotation of hats?
I do usually do a rotation of hats. If I've got multiple hats, I usually rotate them. I'm just not doing the same one all the time. In fact, this one's actually a metal. You can't notice it here, but it's a Metal Gear Solid hat because I've got the Fox sound symbol on the hat. You got the Fox sound going on. Yeah. It's hard to see though because I also have like a kind of a terrible webcam thing going on tonight, so I'm definitely going to look worse than usual tonight, folks. So apologies for that because I'm still working stuff out with the new computer, so that's why
You look glowing. You're very bright.
Yes, that's true. The best part is this is my ring light at the lowest setting, and it's like 5 settings lower than what it usually is on my normal camera. So, yeah, that's what I mean. So, anyways, we're not going to talk about webcams because the RPG Cave, we talk about RPGs all the time, except for, of course, when we start the show. So, folks at home, if you want to support the show, there's a number of awesome ways to do that. Number one, if you're watching the live stream right meow over at youtube.com/carpoolgaming, or if you're watching the video on demand later, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and then ding, 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 ring that notification bell to be notified whenever we go live or whenever we put up new videos on the channel, like Brendan Myers explaining how he would escape the Titanic using a bunch of mattresses on the newest episode of Be the Gamercast, so you can go check that out on the channel.
Nice.
Also, if you're listening on audio feeds, don't forget to subscribe to us there as well, or rate us 5 stars if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And then last but not least, if you want this show a little bit early on the audio feed side, or if you want some exclusive content, head on over to Patreon, patreon.com/carpoolgaming, throw a little tip in the old tip jar, and out comes content. Well, without further ado, Garret, I'm so excited to get into tonight's topic. It is time to read from the sacred texts because we are going to talk about licensed games again. Now, we've already done a licensed game RPG episode where we talked about games that already existed because we talked about know what some of our favorite licensed RPGs are, and we did a little bit of theory crafting in that episode of like what licenses might actually make good RPGs that maybe aren't RPGs already. But we decided actually to do an entire episode devoted to, hey, what other crazy ideas can we come up with for licenses that don't actually have RPGs to become RPGs. So that's what the show is going to be tonight. We're gonna talk about our favorite, movies or TV shows or anime or, whatever else, maybe an album. Maybe you're like, you know what? One of Discovery by Daft Punk, the album would probably make like a really good RPG.
That would be dope.
One of us might actually think that, Garret. Who knows? But
maybe a Linkin Park album. That would be cool.
Oh,
just
nice.
Go through one of those albums and just each song would be a level. I would be down with that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Meteora might be a good RPG. I feel like that
Meteora would be a great RPG. Yes.
Yeah. So there you go. So that's what tonight's show is going to be all about. So we're going to give our pitches to see what's happening, what we think are some awesome ideas. And also we got some ideas from the community as well. So we'll get into those afterwards as well. Nice. So Garret, would you like to go first or second with your list of games?
I'll go first, but just to let you know, I told this to Ryan and everyone know. This was kind of my like I was thinking of like what kind of new ideas to bring the RPG cave. This is one of the ideas I pitched, and the reason for that is like I there were specific ones I wanted to pitch, in this episode, and so I have a short list. I only have three, but I think two of them are very in depth. So I mean. If I would have done like five in depth, this episode would probably go on for like 2 or 3 hours. But
Yeah.
thank goodness it's not. But here's my first one, and I'm just such a nerd over this because I just binge watched this like over the month of December. I rewatched it.
Mhm.
Game of Thrones.
Oh.
Oh man, George. Is it George R. Martin, not Jar Jar.
George
R.
Jar Martin.
Sorry, I
It's
created
a
a
B.
Frankenstein
It's a
there.
Bisa. Jar Jar. Oh my god, I can't even say
George
it on
R.
stream.
Martin.
Jar Jar Martin.
Anyways, he knows how to create a world, man. He created Elden Ring lore. He
Yep.
knows how to create lore from Game of Thrones. I rewatched because I watched House of Dragon, which is their latest show in HBO, which is like one season. Very good. It sets like predates Game of Thrones like hundreds of years before. Game of Thrones lasts for 8 seasons. Don't forget about the last season. It doesn't exist in everyone's heads and fans. But man, oh man, the world that man created is ripe for an RPG. Like, I want the best, most talented people that I can think of. I'm thinking CD Projekt Red. I'm thinking Bethesda. I'm thinking people who can do it right with this RPG. I wanted to make it happen for sure. And it's just because he does such a great job of like building all the different regions. There's so many different clans involved with Game of Thrones. There's so many different ways you can go about it. You can go through your adventure. You can, start out in Westeros, which is like where the Iron Throne is, where the Game of Thrones is. Kind of covers all the kingdoms over there. But there's also this other land to the east, across the sea, the Narrow Sea. So many different types of cities over there. They're called free cities. And so there's different like lore over there as well. Many different quest lines you can do. So I'm imagining this single player RPG. No, not an MMO. This single player RPG where you go through this game and you level up kind of each skill, whether it's combat, whether it's charisma or whatever, based on use, right? You can have your initial skill set that you want, and then you can start whatever clan you want, and then just based on use, you can raise up a certain level. Whether it can be magic, it can be fighting, it can be charisma, whatever you want to do, and then you just go throughout the world and just kind of go through it. There could be like this main storyline, and I was imagining the timeline of this RPG would be right before the first season of Game of Thrones. So this would be during Robert's I think it's Robert Baratheon's rebellion against Aerys Targaryen. This is the Mad King, or Aragon. I forgot the name. There's so many
So kind of
different
like the
names.
same
The Mad
timeline
King.
as like House of the Dragon, kind of, because I think House of the Dragon's also
Yeah.
kind of like a prequel in that timeline, like in that part of the timeline as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah. House of Dragons, 100 years before. I'm thinking right before
Oh, okay.
Game of Thrones.
Okay.
Like Robert is about to become king, and he's king in the first season of Game of Thrones, basically. And so you can like side with whatever clan you want. And I think the main thing about this RPG was it's based on reputation, right? Because there's so many different houses, so many different factions involved. And so if you get more affiliated with a certain faction, let's say House Targaryen or um, Baratheons or Winterfell or whatever, it's going to change how you approach certain lands. It's going to change how you approach certain characters or quest lines. So, like, if you're really buddy with, let's say, the Lannisters, then you may not be welcome in King's Landing during the time because it's still under the Mad King's rule. It's like this type of thing. It's like, it's a lot more faction based than any other RPG I can think of. I
Hmm.
don't know if there's any RPG that can be in comparison with this, because really Skyrim doesn't do much with this. It barely does something with this, right? It does the between the two clans or whatever. It's
Yeah.
the Stormcloaks and the right or
The
the
Imperials.
Imperial.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Imperials. Yeah, that's like one thing. That's just two clans, two factions. Of course, you could do the Mages Guild or whatever, but those are just it. There's so many different houses, so many different clans. That's the beauty of Game of Thrones, right? It's because there's so many different houses involved and so many different relationships involved that you're gonna have to figure it out somehow. So
Nice.
I think this would be a dope RPG to get into.
Yeah.
What do you
Now,
think, Ryan?
first of all, I should throw this out here because I don't because you didn't mention it. Did you know a Game of Thrones RPG already exists, Garrett?
Oh no, don't tell me this,
No, no,
please.
no. It's like completely different from what you're pitching here. But
Okay.
there was a Game of Thrones RPG on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, published by Atlas of all people.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know. But it was also developed by Cyanide, who is a developer
Oh.
that works on a lot of European stuff. They worked on like Call of Cthulhu and the Blood Bowl games. So they're more of like a Focus Home
Oh no,
Entertainment studio.
not
But
too much well known.
yeah,
As yeah.
but yeah,
Okay.
very
Okay.
different game from what you're pitching, which is why like I actually think your idea is way better than what they went with this one, where you're just picking you get to play as generic dude in a house that is apparently a brand new house in the Game of Thrones universe, and you just
Oh
interact with the
no.
characters from the show. So yeah, trust me,
Oh
it was
no.
not me. Like I actually think you're correct in the sense that it's about time that there's a good Game of Thrones RPG, because like
Yes.
we haven't had one. There's been one, but it was not good. It was not well received, critically. It was not. In fact, it was so forgettable that both of us actually forgot it existed until you started talking
I
about
did
it. I was
not
like,
know this
oh
book existed at all.
yeah. I remember seeing the box art at GameStop
Oh
before,
my
and I'm like,
gosh.
oh yeah. There was a Game of Thrones game before, besides the Telltale game, because there's also the Telltale
Oh,
game,
the
and
Telltale
Star Wars
game.
game,
Of
which
course.
also again story wise very similar to what
Very
I
diff-
just described to
Yeah.
this other game I talked
Oh,
about.
I
But
see.
yeah,
I see.
but yeah,
Cool.
I think that's like a really interesting idea. And then I wonder then how they'd have to balance, what factions bonuses are,
Yeah.
with like pluses and minuses for that, because obviously if you make like an optimal path, it makes it less fun for the player, I think, because then everyone's going to go to the one
Mhm.
house that has the best stats and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
I like that idea. Oh, and
You
Yarden points
definitely
out in the
need.
chat, it's a
Mhm.
50 on Metacritic, so it doesn't count. You're good, Garrett.
Oh no, it doesn't count then. All right, let's erase that from existence. That doesn't exist. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just thinking about this more and more. There could be certain attributes that could increase or decrease, but I'm just more interested in if like you're with one faction, buddy with one faction, can you like what can you do with the other factions then? What's the relationship, right? Like it can set you at a disadvantage in certain areas
Yeah.
of the land and more advantage in like in certain areas. And maybe, if you're really buddy with the Winterfell, you can go to the wall in with the Night's Watch, and then you can join the Night's Watch possibly in a certain chapter and then go north of the wall a little bit, and then you can just oh man, I'm just thinking like all the things that they can do in
Hmm.
this game. It's endless. Like
Yeah.
there's so much lore in this game
That's why
left to
again
be
I'm
explored.
I'm like shocked that they never did like the Ubisoft formula Game of Thrones game, or the Witcher
Oh, that would
style
be the
Game of Thrones
best.
game. Like that just
Yeah.
makes no sense to me as to why they never did that. I guess like by the time the show's popularity was waning, like they just decided not to do games, or it's just maybe the Telltale game and then this other Game of Thrones game that I talked about. Maybe they failed so hard that they were just like, nope, we're good with games. We never need to do this again, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
I think what I'm pitching though is like it's a triple A
Yeah.
multi-million dollar project that just they just look at this and like that's a lot of investment, a lot of risk, a lot of gamble. What like who's the right studio to contract this out with?
Yeah.
And like it's I bet it's a lot of deals like that. I'm sure that that's what they were looking at when they were it's like, yeah, that's a potential game, a potential idea, but man, that like costs a lot of money, and we have to give it to the right people, or else it's just going to be out in limbo,
Yeah.
like how many other AAA games are. So, yeah,
Nice.
man,
That's
I
awesome.
would love one
And
now.
actually, it kind of reminds me that your description of that as well also reminds me a lot of Hogwarts Legacy in a lot of ways because,
Yes,
like,
definitely.
because you know there were so many Harry Potter games as the movies were coming out, but they were like in a lot of ways they weren't really ever really what you wanted. Like there was the one RPG on Game Boy that you told me about,
Hmm.
but beyond that,
Yeah, it was
for the
cool.
most part, like you had some open world stuff in the school, but it was not like the Harry Potter like open world RPG that is like
Hmm.
this big budget title that Hogwarts Legacy is going to be next month. So that's
Yeah.
what your pitch kind of reminded me of because I was like, oh yeah, kind of reminds me of that. Lasala in the chat says From Software should make that. That's an interesting pick
It's
for Game of
definitely
Thrones.
not From Software. I just you need so much dialogue in this game. You need so much character building. Dark's, From Software is known for being minimalist, right? They tell stories in silence without any words,
Yeah,
and they do a fantastic job
yeah. Because
with
I actually
that.
think like they would nail the open world aspects of it or the exploratory stuff that you talked about. I don't know
Yes.
about the story though, but yeah,
Yeah, you need many different characters, many different dialogue trees. It has to be it had to be classic BioWare.
yeah.
That
That's
that
actually what I
one
was about to
team.
say. Is maybe
Yeah,
BioWare is probably the better pick for it.
yes, because they're masters at building many trees and many relationships with dialogues with characters. Um, Maybe Bethesda Softworks, but they're doing a lot of different things right now.
Yeah.
Their ideas are pretty much scatterbrained.
I mean, at this
But yeah,
point, Garrett, if you assign them to this game, then Fallout 6 is or Fallout 5 is never coming out. It'll come out in 2045 at this
pretty
point
much.
if they hop on a
Yes.
Game of Thrones game. So good thinking. I like that pitch, Garrett. And that's one
Thank
I
you.
knew was coming as well because I'm actually more
You
excited to
knew it
hear
was
your next one
coming.
because I saw your tweet about it because you tweeted about this a few weeks ago, I think. So
Oh, it's so good.
yeah. Okay. So before you go again, Garrett, I'm gonna go because I have 7 in total, but
Yeah, you have a lot.
none of them are nearly as in depth as any of yours. So I think I'll
Okay.
do 2 before I send it back to you. Some two
Yeah,
kind
do
of
too.
quicker ones. So first off, and some y'all are gonna recognize some of these from the thumbnail, and some of them you're not because I went off a little off base and a little bit crazy with some of these. So first up, a series that I'm actually surprised has never gotten an RPG, even though there's been a lot of games in this series
Hmm.
over the years, is Ghostbusters. I actually think Ghostbusters would make a really good RPG. Now, here, let me tell you the pitch on this, Garrett, because of course, like
Okay.
when you watch, the original Ghostbusters movie, one of the big things about that movie is they're struggling for cash. They're having to, build all their stuff themselves. There's a lot of crafting involved. Like I
That's true.
imagine like a turn-based Ghostbusters RPG where you play as the 4 Ghostbusters, and then
Okay.
as you complete different missions and earn money, you then go back to the hideout and then build more equipment, like more ghost busting equipment, or either or like upgrade the firehouse to do a bunch of different things. You could get different skills for, Vankman or Winston or the other Ghostbusters that are in your party. You could maybe even recruit other people to become Ghostbusters. And also, you could have all kinds of interesting bosses with all the weird and wacky kind of ghosts from Ghostbusters. Not only that too, but one of the best parts about the original Ghostbusters movie was just the witty dialogue. And I think like an RPG, especially like a turn-based one or a slower-paced RPG, would totally be able to nail that level of humor and that level of writing in it. And I think like when you look at the history of Ghostbusters games, past the NES era, they've all wanted to be like third-person shootery kind of games. But I just don't think that really fits the Ghostbusters IP super well. Sure, it's fine to use your proton pack to then shoot the ghosts flying around, but then you're kind of just holding them in place for a while and then eventually getting to the trap and then having them fall in. But like, I don't know, there's something about like a turn-based experience that I think would bring a lot of levity to that IP or make it feel like the world of Ghostbusters in a way that maybe the games haven't done already. Because that's just a problem I've always had with the Ghostbusters games. They just feel okay, but they don't really feel like it doesn't really feel like you're the Ghostbusters in any of the Ghostbusters
Mm.
games. And I really think that this is like a genre that actually would suit the IP pretty well, and I would love to see it. So like a JRPG style turn-based Ghostbusters game, I think would
Mm.
be really, really awesome, and I would love to see something like that. Before I move on to my second one, Garrett, what do you think about that idea?
I like it more than the current vibe with the Ghostbusters, and especially with the video game IP. I'm not a big fan of Ghostbusters, to be quite honest with you, but
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with you that this kind of this couch co-op multiplayer thing. Of course, they have to want to go to that direction because a lot of Ghostbuster fans may not be gamers.
Mhm.
And so they need to appeal to those people that want to, get together and feel like being in a crew and figuring out how to get rid of the ghosts somehow with their weapons. And I get that. I get the pitch. Why, from a business standpoint, why the Ghostbusters IP is like that in
Yeah.
video games. I do like a turn-based RPG more. I like that more than what they have now. But man, I was first imagining like what's the game called? But it's like very similar to XCOM. It's
Oh.
oh man, what's it called? It's with the animal heads. I actually played it like so
Oh,
much
Mutant U
too.
Zero.
Mutant Year Zero.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking with the Ghostbusters, because it's a tight crew, and then you kind of just figure out go on a mission, and there's like a fog of war,
Hmm.
with the ghosts too. You don't know until you get closer to them, and then of course you can like go back and like build up and craft your weapons or whatever and build resources.
Yeah.
I like that more gameplay loop with that IP than what is going on now
Yeah.
with the couch co-op multiplayer stuff. So yeah, I'm down.
Yeah.
I would try it out
That
if
would
it's
be
on Game Pass.
again. I think that would be dope. Like I'm like you. I'm not like a super big Ghostbusters fan, but I love the first Ghostbusters movie. And again, like
Okay.
that's the first Ghostbusters movie. What made it so it works so well is the fact that it was a comedy first, and then an action movie second. And
Yes.
a lot of times when you just distill it into a game form, it just becomes the actiony part, or they put a focus on that over the comedy bit. Whereas again, like a slower paced game, I feel like could really take advantage of that comedic timing and actually make a really good experience. So yeah, Ghostbusters is
Mhm.
one like I really thought about it, kind of like my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles pitch, like that I made the last time we
Yeah.
did this. Like again, you've got four main characters already, which is usually the same number of people that you'd have in your party. So I kind of like, I don't know, it fits together in an interesting way. So that's my
For
first
sure.
one. My
Cool.
second one, I've been craving a game like Valkyria Chronicles for a very, very,
Oh
very long
yeah.
time. Valkyria Chronicles, of course, for folks that haven't played it, is a strategy role playing game, kind of like Fire Emblem, but instead of it being grid based, all of your characters take turns, and you have these action points, and depending on how far you run in any direction, you'll run out of action points, and then you can hide behind cover, or you would initiate in combat. But the way combat works in it is it's not just turn based where you initiate an attack and then it just automatically shoots them. It then goes into a third person mode where you're actually shooting the enemies like a third person shooter. So the idea that I came up with or the license I wanted to fuse with this style, is another franchise that again has had a lot of games before, and trust me, when we get towards the end of the show, I'm going to bring up franchises that don't have any games at all. But these two I think are my strongest ones, and they've already had games already. So another franchise, kind of like Ghostbusters, that's always been mired in weird game styles or things that just don't fit the IP, is Alien versus Predator. I actually think
Great.
an Alien versus Predator game like Valkyria Chronicles, where you play as the Space Marines and you're hiding behind cover, and then you're shooting at the aliens or predators that are coming towards you, or ambushing the predators as they're stalking the aliens or stalking your troops, or putting traps together, or using some of the space age weaponry found in the aliens universe. I think that would be like a really interesting idea and approach to that franchise, because that the Alien vs Predator franchise is always, as far as games are concerned, pretty much has always been first person shooters, with the exception of something like Alien Isolation, which was a straight up horror game where you didn't have any weapons. But I feel like you could fit like a nice happy medium, because again, kind of like my Ghostbusters example, the main reason why I always feel a lot of disconnect with the Aliens games when we get them is for the same reason, where they're very much about tension, crossed with an action movie. So they're very tense because if an alien sneaks up on you, you're kind of just dead right there. So it can make for like a very tense strategy role playing game, which I think would actually lend itself well to that genre in a big way, or at least feel closer to that genre, rather than running around and standing at a switch and then shooting aliens as they come towards you. Like that doesn't feel like the IP at all. It just doesn't feel like I'm playing the movie in the same way that I actually think like a Valkyria Chronicles style game would, because you'd still get the action element of shooting, the aliens or the predators or what have you throughout the experience. But then you'd also get the tactical element that then could lead to some really tense battles. Plus, you could have some amazing boss battles versus like the Queen Alien or some of the like the high tech predators and stuff like that. Like I think it would be like a really interesting, tactical role playing game. But again, Garrett, going back to you, what do you think about this idea?
I would play this 100%. I do like your pitches, but we know that these IP just go to like more kind of broad audience based, non-gamer based type of genres, and that's why they just, end up in these bargain bin kind of games here. I would really like this.
Yeah.
Like going through a crew of Space Marines, it's all like a whole separate story.
Yeah.
And just go through just level after level, facing aliens or facing predators or whatever. Is the aliens and predators, they're like sworn enemies too, right? Like they want to beat each other up as well.
Yeah, I mean, the aliens are mostly just like very intelligent animals, and they basically exist for the purpose of capturing other life forms and then bringing them to their hive so then they can reproduce. And then the predators, their whole deal is they're trying to fight and hunt the most powerful prey that are out there in the universe.
Oh,
so they
okay.
see the xenomorphs, the aliens, as like a worthy adversary to hunt. Just like the humans are, like Space Marines in particular. That's why it works so well, because like the Space Marines are also quite powerful as well, because they have a lot of technology at their disposal. But the predators are like highly technologically advanced, because they have like cloaking systems and shoulder mounted rocket launchers and stuff. So yeah, I think it'd be pretty cool.
You got many different characteristics going involved with each of the types as well. I'm wondering if you can play not just Space Marines, but you could play as the aliens or as the predators too.
And they've done that in the games before, because we have Alien versus Predator games where you play as both the alien and the predator and the Marines, like all in one game. So that's definitely not a new idea as well. And not only that too, the Alien versus Predator franchise isn't even brand new to strategy games, because most people don't remember, but on the PSP and the original Xbox,
oh goodness,
believe it or not, they actually had a a real-time strategy game where you played as the predators and you hunted the aliens. It was not an amazing game, but they toyed with this idea before, which is why I actually think it makes a lot of sense.
A real-time strategy game on the PSP.
Yeah,
that's something I would have never guessed.
And OG Xbox, because it released on both platforms at the same time.
Interesting. Well, I like your pitch more. I would be totally down with this. Valkyria Chronicles, I like that touch, because it is a distinct style of strategy role-playing game that you really don't see in any other game. Like when you say Valkyria Chronicles, it's like there's no other game that's like that
There's
per
only
se.
one. It's Natural
What's it?
Doctrine on the PlayStation Vita, and that game
Oh
sucks
yeah.
because it's really hard.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, because you have this kind of mix of strategy and action. Because the action base, you really got to aim
Hmm.
pretty accurately and steadily. And sometimes, it's kind of hard because maybe your character's tired or like you're waiting too long. There's some action quips with that game as well that you can lend itself into this pitch. But I have a question for you, Ryan.
Yeah.
Who, what studio is meant for this? Is it the Valkyria Chronicles studio, or is there a studio that you had in mind
I didn't
that could
have one
do
in
this?
mind, but I kind of wish it was Firaxis, if I'm being honest. Even though they would make it,
Firaxis
maybe
would be
they
dope.
might be tempted to
Yeah,
make it in the XCOM style. I actually think they would be do a really good job with this.
for sure. They know how to make, build up these types of levels,
Yeah.
and build up that world and lore, especially looking at XCOM. And Marvel's Midnight Suns has a little difference for sure. It
Yeah.
has a different flavor of a game separate from XCOM. So
Oh,
I'm
and we're gonna
sure
get to that because
they,
I have a pitch coming up after you give yours, Garrett. That is gonna be
yeah,
like, man, when I saw Midnight Suns, insert IP here. I'm gonna talk about that
got
after
it.
your pitch because I actually have a
Cool.
good idea for that.
Sounds good. Well, I like it
All
very
right.
much. I would buy it.
Thanks, man. All right, back to you, good sir, because I know you have another big pitch for us.
I have a huge pitch for you, and I have to thank actually someone in the audience Blaze Knight. I'm just gonna say this right now. A game set in the Avatar: The Last Airbender world would make a great RPG. Blaze Knight, I 100% agree with you. This needs to happen. Of course, we've had a couple of licensed games from this show, but it's just, throwaway type of games. Legend of Korra, made by Platinum Games, was a huge miss as
Yeah.
well.
Don't forget about the
But
Avatar game,
man,
which is the easiest 1,000 achievement points ever, where you can get them all in 45 minutes by pressing the X
and it
button over and over again.
also on sale and it's backwards compatible. So go get your achievement um gold over there. But anyways, Avatar: The Last Airbender, I have a pitch for you. It is an open world MMO,
Ooh.
action RPG, specifically MMO. And hold on, I got my notes here. Because Avatar: The Last Airbender, the world, did a very good job of like having very distinct regions and origins, right? You can start as either I'm thinking like as a character, you build your character. You can start either as an airbender, a firebender, a waterbender, or earthbender, something like that, right? The timeline for my pitch for this is actually between um hmm, it's gonna be between the Avatar, The Last Airbender, and Korra. It's gonna
Okay.
be when Aang was kind of an adult. So you can't be an airbender, actually. So I'll just throw that
Because he's
away.
the last
Can't be
one.
an
There
air.
can't be any other ones.
He's the last one, and he's the only one that has kids that has can do airbending. So we'll throw that out of the way. But anyways, there's other means where you can do airbending tricks as a non-bender. You can get to that level if you want. But as a fire, water, earthbender, or you could be non-benders too. And those non-benders, they can be pretty powerful too. There's many different warriors, archers, specialty weapons in this game that you can be like tightly. You can just be a fighter that blocks chi.
Hmm.
Like you can have so many different build up classes, and that's that would be great for an MMO because an MMO needs variety of classes, skills, builds. I think it would be great with the Avatar: Last Airbender. There's so many different locations too that you can just kind of visit, and it's more like it doesn't have to be a single player storyline. There can be a storyline if you want to, but it's more like, oh, let's visit all the characters around the area.
Hmm.
And during this time frame between Korra and Avatar, there were some criminals, but there wasn't like this overarching villain per se. So it's still pretty good with an MMO. And there's a lot to be explored in this timeline in between. There's really not much to say. There's some comics, but not really any. There's no shows, right? There's no movies about it.
Hmm.
Um, So you can build up a lot of lore in each of the cities. You can go to the capital. You can go to the Earth Kingdom, and then the two water tribes. There's the four airbending temples, and then you got the Fire Nation with Zuko leading the nation now. I'm just saying this would be like pretty big, I think, as an open action MMO RPG. My vote is for Avatar: Last Airbender. Also, with bending too, Ryan, there's so many different styles, right? It's not just, oh, there's water bending, you're done with water bending, right? There's sand bending, there's mud bending, there's different styles of water bending, like defensive or healing or something like that. Fire bending can have lava bending, earth bending can have metal bending, so on and so forth. So there's many different blends, many different varieties and skills that you can build up in the Avatar universe. Make it happen. I want the Final Fantasy 14 studio to make this.
Yoshi
please.
P, get on it. Quit. Stop making
Yoshi
Final
P,
Fantasy
please.
16. Go make Avatar: The Last Airbender for Square Enix.
Yes.
Not to be confused with
100%.
Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora over at Ubisoft.
Not the blue people. No.
Not the blue people. Yeah,
sorry, James Cameron. I'm kind of done. I'm kind of tired of the blue man. I'm back to the Avatar.
Already? You got 2 movies in, Garret, and you just can't hang with them anymore, even though there's 5 more Avatar movies coming?
Oh my gosh. I watched the latest movie. It was fine. I was just like, this is good. It's good. It's not like,
yeah.
But it doesn't excite me.
It's not the
much.
greatest
Anyways.
movie on Earth. But enough about all of that, because we're not talking about Avatar. We're talking about Avatar here. So, first of all, Garret, I can't say too much about the Avatar franchise myself, because I just haven't watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, because I don't know, I just never really got into it.
Yes.
But at the same time, I actually think that the idea you propose is actually, it sounds like it's actually going to be would be like a really fun MMO with a lot of customization options and different, like the classes. It sounds like there could be a ton of different classes. Like you basically pick your one of your 3 bending styles or non-bender, and then probably there's like specializations or different classes beneath that are then, you know, like rock bending or metal bending or whatever that you want your class or your specialization to be. And then of course, you know, we know the world is rich with things to explore from Avatar. So yeah, I think you've got a really solid idea, Garret, for a good MMO. I'm actually kind of surprised they haven't done anything like this, because even if they didn't do an MMO, I'm actually surprised that they never tried an RPG with Avatar at all. In like the bajillions of ideas they had with Avatar, I'm actually surprised they never tried an RPG in particular of any kind.
And it would be nice if it would just be like as simple as create a new character. It can be in like any kind of bender, and you just go through a story. Like, you know, as simple as that. I think it'd still be a pretty fun game if you execute it pretty well. Yeah, man. There's just so many different types of skills as a bender and a non-bender. Like there's, because they really emphasized and inspired by like a lot of Chinese martial arts and weapons. It's actually kind of cool to see the variety of non-bending styles as well. There's Kyoshi warriors, there's the chi blockers, there's there's so many different weapons, like, you know, swords and the scythes and with scimitars, and you can go in the desert. Oh my gosh, there's just so much lore involved in that Avatar as well. It's just, yeah, I'm good. That'd be really cool.
That sounds awesome. You know, Garret, even though I don't care about Avatar: The Last Airbender, I would play that game as someone who likes MMOs. That sounds like a fun game. So there you go.
And I'll raid with you.
Excellent.
I'll be the lava bender, because I love the earth bending.
Yeah, we'll have to get Lasala in the chat to play with us as well, because she also says it sounds like a fun game. But
yes, let's do it.
All right. Now, Garret, I got 2 more for you before you do your last one.
Go for
it. These will be quicker, especially because the first one just kind of rates itself when I tell you what it is. So as soon as I saw Marvel's Midnight Suns, Garret, with the card-based tactical action of Marvel's Midnight Suns, the franchise I immediately thought of when seeing this was Magic the Gathering, because Magic the Gathering has had games before, but they're mostly just the card game and nothing else. The Magic the Gathering universe is so rich with so many different characters and so much great lore. And I think you could even just play as a bunch of the planeswalkers that then would be able to use the card-based combat from Marvel's Midnight Suns to either, cast spells from Magic the Gathering or summon creatures from Magic the Gathering to then kind of do attacks with. Like, I think like that style of game where you basically have a bunch of the Magic the Gathering planeswalkers together instead of the heroes from the Marvel universe and kind of just copy the template of Marvel's Midnight Suns, I think you've got a winning formula right there. Because I know that they wanted to do a Magic the Gathering MMO and that fell apart because they didn't put enough money into it, so they just kind of canceled it. And Magic the Gathering, I think, is a universe that deserves more than just games based that are just literally representations of the cards, because I think the universe is strong enough to support it, especially because we know there's actually a Netflix Magic the Gathering series that's coming out pretty soon, and the fact that there isn't like a game like this to go along with it just hurts, breaks my heart a little bit as a Magic the Gathering fan.
Sorry.
So
yeah,
that's definitely one that I would love to see. So that's why my pitch is pretty quick for it, because I think it's pretty much you just take the formula of Marvel's Midnight Suns, throw Magic the Gathering in there, and I think it would be amazing. But
I would be down for it. Is there like with the planeswalkers? I guess there's just different colors, right? Yeah. Is there different teams? Yeah. Clans or whatever?
Yeah, I mean that they're all like, so the planeswalkers themselves can travel between different worlds. Like that's what makes them planeswalkers. But they also have like evil planeswalkers and planeswalkers of different factions. Like right now in the Magic the Gathering storyline, the planeswalkers are currently fending off a race of evil creatures called the Phyrexians, which are like this ancient race of machines that are kind of like the Borg from Star Trek, where they're trying to assimilate all the universe together into like one hive mind. So in the storyline, there's a bunch of planeswalkers that actually defected to Phyrexia. So now you've got like planeswalkers that used to be good but are now part of the evil faction, and they're now enemies that they're fighting, but they've also been like turned into like twisted machines and stuff. So I think like even that, like that's just one set. Like there's a bunch of layering storylines on top of each other throughout the Magic universe, which is why I also think it would make like a really good RPG, because I think there's a lot of lore there. I think there's a lot of story to tell in the Magic the Gathering universe, and they could go to different planes. Like they could go to Theros, which is kind of like Greek mythology plane, or they could go to Ravnica, which is the city with like these 10 guilds that kind of rule the city together, that are represented by the different colors of Magic the Gathering. I think there's a lot there that they could do with this.
I'm down.
So there you go. That's my Magic the Gathering idea. But the other one, and this is a franchise I'm surprised hasn't had more than just fighting games yet, because it's only had 2 games in this franchise. It's fairly new. It's a fairly new anime series. Because yes, Garret, we're finally getting to the anime section of this podcast. It's My Hero Academia. My Hero Academia is a superhero, school show, where, it's about these, students at this high school where they're learning to be superheroes, kind of in the same way that I thought about Harry Potter. I thought like that mold in a lot of ways kind of applies to My Hero Academia. But the idea that I thought about with that is, the company that makes a lot of the Shonen Jump games, which of course My Hero Academia is as part of the Shonen Jump line, is Bandai Namco. And Bandai Namco also makes the Tales games. So I would love to see a My Hero Academia game in the style of a Tales game, where it's like an action RPG. There's this big open world of superheroes that you can go explore, and you're, taking down criminals and saving people and fighting crimes and stuff like that are kind of like the missions. But then there's this, greater story that's happening with the League of Villains. I think it would make like a really cool action RPG with like a group of characters, either UA students, or maybe it's a game that focuses around the heroes themselves. Like maybe you play as Endeavor and Hawks and Best Jeanist and a bunch of the other adult superheroes going around and doing stuff. But I'm actually surprised that they haven't done more with My Hero Academia as a franchise outside of just the 2 3D fighting games that they have. And I think that it would be like a really awesome RPG, or as LaSalle points out in the chat, My Hero Academia would be a sick game, especially if you got to create your own character. Yeah, I think that would be awesome too. If you created your character, your own superhero that had your own quirk that then could join, the group from, UA high school. I think that would be really, really sweet. So, My Hero Academia Tales style game, I think would be really awesome. So, I had to
I
throw that
I
in there.
would I would definitely hop into that one. I've never been too big of a fan of the Tales formula, but like if it's coupled with the My Hero Academia lore, I really enjoy the anime of what I've watched. I haven't gone actually back to it in a while. I
Mhm.
should probably go back, but dang, I love those characters. I love the action involved. It's so comical, so um man, they just do a very good job of the animations
Yeah.
in that show. So yeah, if they could bring that into a video game, Tails would probably a Tails formula would be the best because you want to like control different heroes if you wanted to,
Yeah.
right? And like have different types of quirks and abilities. I would be down with that
Yeah,
for sure.
especially like the
Yeah.
Tales series actually does a great job of giving you characters in your party that feel very different to play from each other, which is exactly
Mhm.
how I feel like a My Hero Academia game should feel. Where if you let's say you've got Deku and Bakugo in your same party with Todoroki, like all three of those characters should play totally different from each other because their combat styles are completely different from each other. Like I think like
Mhm.
that's the type of thing you could go with, or so I think like that's a franchise that would really benefit from a game like that. So yeah, and not only that too, but also you get to see throughout the show like the way that they progress with new equipment as they're adding to their costume, or new
Mhm.
skills that they get along the way as they're learning their quirks better, which you could also build into the gameplay as well. So yeah,
Mhm.
I think My Hero Academia would make a sweet action RPG. And again, that's another game too where I wouldn't want to make it turn based because you actually want to you know
You
feel
want to
the
feel
action
it,
of
man.
playing. Yeah, you want to
Yeah.
be able to also explore the city and stuff like that too. Like I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool, man. I like it.
Nice.
There's been, oh man, I wasn't really touching anime too much because so many animes have done so many different types of games.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just couldn't find one anime. I was like, oh, I would definitely like an RPG of this. But yeah, I would be totally down with My Hero Academia for sure.
Nice.
Um, all right, so my last one, and I think you may have never heard of this. I think a lot of people never heard of this, but I got a lot of inspiration from the game I'm playing right now on Game Pass, Chained Echoes. It's a great kind of JRPG, classic JRPG inspired little game, and it does a very good job of just creating its own story with its own system. It's very focused of just one storyline and just go throughout that storyline and you go from beginning to end. Very cool. It's like a novel series, right? It's like a series. Honestly, books um kind of lend themselves being one of the best creations of lore and story. And so this is what I pitch. There's these books called Cirque du Freak, and I know they made a very bad movie in 2010 or whatever. I'm not talking about that movie. Let's just forget about that. But Cirque du Freak, made by Darren Shan, one of my favorite authors actually, is a 12-book series that takes, he's kind of the main character, and like he goes from beginning to end, right, in this series. Um, there's a lot of story in these books, right? It's all about him, about that character, and then his relationships to other characters. It's vampires. It's all about vampires,
Mm.
really. So, basically, the first character kind of like goes through the transformation of being a vampire, and then like his friend does as well. But there's a lot of tension involved with many different clans of vampires and so on and so forth. And so what I'm imagining is let's have this classic JRPG style in that we just copy and paste that storyline in that format. It would be really nice. Just because it really does well with the story, right? All the different characters. I'm even thinking about like the 16-bit style
Mm.
characters too. Just like having these characters all in one screen, going through these animations or whatever. Do a storyline beat for beat. Okay, let's go into a battle, and like that battle will be turn based, and then you'll be in control of your party, whether it's 2 or 3 characters, including your main one. And then you level up, and then as you go throughout this game, your vampire skills get stronger, and so you can get more of those types of skills later on. So I think, and there will be many types of mini bosses, big bosses behind this game as well, because they go through tons of battles in these books. And so yeah, I would definitely pitch this game pretty well. I know a lot of people will be like, wait, what the heck? What kind of weird clashing of vampires and classic JRPG? Like that sounds weird to me. It's like, trust me, guys, it's a story. You got characters in there. It would be really nice to just fit in that format. I would be totally be down with that. So
nice.
That's my pitch.
Yeah, especially since it doesn't sound like they're going back to the well with those movies at this point, because the vampire assistant did enough damage on its own. They never need to go back to those movies ever again.
Right.
But maybe in video game form, maybe that's the best way to explore that franchise. Again, I'm not super familiar with it, but the game that you pitched sounds fun. So, and I like vampires, and one of my remaining picks also has vampires in it too. So I think we were on the same page with a little bit of this. But
nice. The writing is very so. Darren Shan does a very good job of describing the characters, describing the actions, like he gets down to like he'll fill up 10 pages of just like what's the detail of a character, what's the attitude of a character. And I think, and you could just do beat for beat, almost like line to line dialogue into a classic RPG game. That would be really cool. I'd be super down with that.
Nice. That's awesome, man. I like that too. You had like a good variety of different styles of games too tonight, Garret. You had an MMO, like a classic turn-based game, and like a Skyrim, like Witcher style game.
Yes.
Good variety there, Garret. I'm impressed.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. You ready to hear my last 3 remaining ones, and one like
Sure.
A couple of them are already out there, but first one, actually full credit to this one that I'm about to read, is actually not one I came up with myself, although I'm going to claim credit that I did, but really it was Lasala in the car today came up with this one for me. And that is Neon Genesis Evangelion, the anime about the mechs and Shinji getting in the robot, needs a strategy role-playing game, Garret. Kind of like Sakura Wars, where you're fighting the angels and you're fighting, other things that they fight in that franchise. I think that would be really cool. And of course, I'm just a huge fan of it. That's actually my all-time favorite anime. So,
really,
yeah. And there's actually
it's super short, isn't it? Like,
yeah, it's only
it's not long at all.
Well, it's like 26 episodes. That's your standard length. And then of course you've got the 4 rebuild movies as well, which are kind of their own thing as well. But the thing is, we've had Evangelion games before, but none of them have come to North America at all. They've only been Japan only, because we had a couple on N64 and Sega Saturn, but they were visual novels or fighting games. So we've never actually had like an RPG in this franchise. And yeah, kind of like, I thought of Sakura Wars a lot when thinking about this pitch. But I mean, Sakura Wars, for folks that don't know, is like a visual novel game that is also a, strategy role-playing game with mechs that takes place with like steampunk mechs in like the 1920s. Whereas, Evangelion kind of, you could take the same idea with the mech-based combat that you'd see in a game like Sakura Wars. You could even have the same team work on that, that worked on Sakura Wars, and then have like the story played out maybe as a visual novel, or similar to Sakura Wars where you have like choices, and you build relationships with the other characters. I think that would be pretty cool. So had to include that in here. Next one, though, and Garret, speaking of vampires, this is another franchise that had a bunch of movies, but never had any video games, and it actually heavily involves vampires, and that is Underworld, the Underworld franchise, the werewolf versus vampire movie series. My pitch for this one, or my thought process for this one, is I think you could do it where you start out as a human, and it kind of is like a Mass Effect style game where you might make a bunch of different choices, where you could decide, where eventually like you reach a pivotal point in the game where you have to decide whether you want to join the Lycans or the vampires. And then depending on which choice you make, you then play through the rest of the story on that side and see it from that point of view. And then of course you're going around making choices and, building relationships with your fellow, death dealers, aka the vampires, or the lycans, aka the werewolves, until it kind of reaches this big conflict and this big battle between the two different factions, because they do not like each other, Garrett. They're mortal enemies. So I think that would be like a really interesting idea for a game. And again, like the Underworld franchise is like, even though those movies are kind of, schlocky and kind of, like all action and kind of no substance in a lot of ways, I actually think that there's some interesting lore behind all of that stuff. So I actually think it would make like a pretty cool role-playing game. So I wanted to pitch that one. And then last but not least, Garrett, of course, this one was on the thumbnail. So, I mean, we can't go any further if I don't mention this one. Garrett knows what's coming here. The Room, the Tommy Wiseau hit movie, The Room, Mass Effect style BioWare RPG. You play as Tommy Wiseau in a battle for betrayal and friendships, and everyone turns against you because you make poor choices. You have to go and pet the dog while picking up flowers for your girlfriend, because there's romance, Garrett. Of course there's romance, just like in Mass Effect. I mean, come on, why wouldn't The Room make a great RPG? Right there, you play as Tommy Wiseau. It's a great idea.
I think it would be one of the more entertaining RPGs for sure. I think the whole thing would be just nothing but dialogue.
Yeah.
Just dialogue trees after and it's not even good like dialogue options. It's just super crappy ones. Yeah. Each option's like pretty bad, and you're like, I don't know which one's worse. Do I just go crazy or do I not? Like, this would be that kind of RPG.
Do you just randomly tear your hair out, or do you say you're breaking my heart, Lisa?
You're breaking my heart, Lisa.
Oh my god.
And then there's like expressions like squints eyes or whatever. It's like, something like that. Or
exactly.
I just remember the scene where he just goes up to the roof. He's like, I do not. Oh, hi, Mark.
Yeah, up on the roof with the green screen roof.
Up on the roof. Yeah.
Oh my god. That movie's so good,
man.
Yeah.
I watched that one in theater.
Yeah, because here's the thing. I actually believe, even though people say The Room is the worst movie of all time, I would actually say Manos: The Hands of Fate is the worst movie of all time. Of course, from the 1960s, it's really bad. It's been on Mystery Science Theater a thousand times, but that movie has a game based off of it. It's like a side-scrolling platforming shooter. So if Manos: The Hands of Fate can get a video game, Garrett, I think The Room can get like a kind of like a dialogue heavy RPG equivalent. I think
that would be something.
That would be interesting.
Boy, oh boy.
Good.
I would laugh. Actually, I would be too intrigued about this game, and I would buy it.
People would buy it just because they were like, what? There's a video game based off The Room? I have to play this. I have to know what this is like. Oh my god. People would love it. People would love it. It would be this year's Vampire Survivors, Garrett, if The Room, the video game, was a real thing. But
very true.
Anyways,
very addicting.
That's all from our pitches, but let's let some of our friends into the cave with us, because we got a couple other suggestions. Of course, we read Blaze Knight's earlier, so huge shout out to Blaze Knight for suggesting Avatar: The Last Airbender in the Discordia. But then I'm gonna bring in the Muffin Mon, aka Kevin Ainsworth, who says, I want a Yu Yu Hakusho JRPG. One Piece Odyssey has convinced me that this is a genre more anime can be adopted to successfully. Yeah, absolutely. I actually think Yu Yu Hakusho is a really good idea for an RPG, and more so to Kevin's point, both One Piece Odyssey and the Fairy Tail RPG from Gust really proved that turn-based RPGs could really make a lot of anime series really shine. So I actually think like he's on the right track here. I think Yu Yu Hakusho is one. I actually would love to see Sailor Moon in the similar style. That was one that I thought about pitching, but I know that there's already a Sailor Moon RPG on Super Nintendo, so I didn't want to bring that up again. Or even Dragon Ball would be interesting like this. Bleach would be interesting. Like there's a lot of
would be good. Yeah.
Inuyasha would be another one. Like I think there's a lot of good.
Hunter x Hunter.
Yeah, Hunter x Hunter. I think you'd even do like a good Trigun turn-based RPG, especially because like we've got the new Trigun series out now. I
Right.
actually think that'd be like a really cool idea too, is to do like a turn-based game. So I like where Kevin's head is at on this one. Where also I saw that you highlighted Yu Yu Hakusho. You had to go look this up. I'm guessing,
I
right?
had to look. I've never heard of this one. It looks pretty. It looks pretty old actually, like
Yeah.
one of the first ones.
Well, yeah, that's like a late '90s, early 2000s
Oh,
anime,
okay.
because it was actually one of the first anime series that Funimation did here in North America that they dubbed. It's because they dubbed it around the same time. Because after they did Dragon Ball Z, they then did Blue Gender and then Yu Yu Hakusho. Those were like their first three anime series that they did. You know, ooh, I like this. Lachlan in the chat says Death Note RPG with light writing in his notebook as some of the moves.
Oh, that would be dope.
Oh man,
I
that would
I
be
don't
really
know if that
interesting.
would just be a role playing game or just like that's a video game
You
in
just write
general.
you
Like
just
just
write names.
you just write names and oh man, that would be scary
But actually,
actually.
no, that would be interesting because then like you'd have to come up with dialogue choices to then elude L or the other police officers and kind of fool them into getting on your side.
Yeah, it'd be more a detective game
Yeah,
than anything.
that would be.
Yeah, trying to trick them.
I actually think
Like
Death
more Hitman style.
again. Kind of, I like where Luckless heads at on this one too because I think Death Note's actually like an interesting idea for a video game, just in general. It doesn't even have to be an RPG. I think that's interesting.
Yeah,
But then
I'd be down with it.
Nagachaka rounds it out with his final suggestion. Apparently, there's a Kickstarter campaign for this, so hopefully it comes to fruition and is done properly. But I think it's a crime that nobody has made a Cowboy Bebop RPG. Cowboy Bebop is the perfect anime to be adapted as an RPG, just like how The Last of Us is the perfect game to be adapted to a TV series. Well, joke's on you, Nagachaka, because on the PlayStation 2, there in fact is a Cowboy Bebop RPG. It just never came out in North America. So it exists.
Oh darn.
It
It exists
exists.
somewhere.
It exists somewhere. But, not here. But yes, obviously, I wouldn't, be like, how dare you not think about that? But you're right. I actually think Cowboy Bebop 2, just like some of the other games we talked about, like, I think it's so hard to adapt a franchise like Cowboy Bebop because it is so dialogue heavy.
It
And
is, yeah.
and there's some good action scenes, but for the most part, the dialogue takes center stage. So I actually think an RPG is maybe a good way of doing that because versus what we got with Samurai Champloo, because folks that maybe not remember, there actually is like a Samurai Champloo PS2 game that was like an action game, but not an RPG. And that's another franchise that I think kind of like Cowboy Bebop is, where it is very dialogue heavy and then the action is kind of secondary. I actually think that would have made like a good RPG as well. Like that was one I actually thought about putting on my list too, was a Samurai Champloo game. But I didn't want to steal the thunder from Nagachaka's, suggestion for Cowboy Bebop. But what do you think about a Cowboy Bebop game, Garrett?
I'd be down.
Yeah.
It's a very cool kind of setting, this futuristic slash classic blend. I don't know, this Western blend to it. I mean that's why I like Star Wars a lot too, is because it has that fusion involved. I'm just trying to think of like mechanics wise. I guess he would just be the main character, in a Cowboy Bebop
Yeah.
RPG.
Or I
Yeah,
mean, it
but
could be
yeah,
a party-based RPG where you play as
it could
the
be.
Bebop crew. Like you could play as Jet and Faye. You can't really play as
Yeah.
Ed because Ed doesn't really do anything. I guess you can't really play as Ian the dog either because the dog.
That's
But
true.
you have a 3-person party right there. That's the same number of people in your party as Final Fantasy VII Remake. So why
That's true.
not? YOLO.
I know. Yo, I'll be down.
Yeah, sounds pretty cool. But anyways, I think that's gonna do it for tonight's episode. But before we go, Garrett plugs go.
You can follow me on Twitter at Blind Explosion, and you're gonna find me the last time this week on Nintendo Shack, part
Aw.
of the Play Some Video Games Podcast Network. Yes, I decided to drop Shack just mainly due to timing and scheduling reasons. It was hard for both me and Rebecca to figure it out, especially with different work schedules and different time zones. It was just a little rough for both of us. So, yeah, I decided to drop that. But this week will be my last week, and I'll be back occasionally on Nintendo Shack for sure.
Yeah.
Throughout the years, But yeah, you can find me over there as well, and they release on uh, everything as well:
Yeah.
Google, Apple, YouTube,
Well, likewise,
all
just because
the
Garrett's
podcast
leaving,
services.
don't stop supporting them as well. They're awesome. Go make sure to
They're great.
subscribe to Shep. It's again to your point, Garrett. No one is really truly gone on a PSVG show because Donnie was like, I'm never coming back to Shaq, and he's there all the time. So
Yeah,
you never
pretty
know.
much.
You never know.
You never know.
Yeah. As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. You can find us on Twitter at Carpool Gaming, on YouTube at youtube.com/Carpool Gaming, and on podcast services around the globe. Also, I wanted to also plug this Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or noon Pacific in Garrett's time zone. We will be watching the Xbox Games Showcase, including Redfall, as well as Minecraft Legends and a bunch of other stuff. So make sure to come back right here to youtube.com/Carpool Gaming and watch the live stream together. We're going to have a fun time. It's going to be myself, Sean Capri, and Court Lalonde. So make sure to come and hang out for that. No Starfield, though, Garrett. I was tempted to say we'd see Starfield there, but no Starfield.
No Starfield, which is I'm glad they put it out there. They're gonna do their own thing. That's definitely what I would like to see is something separate from Starfield. I'm very excited for Minecraft Legends and Redfall. Redfall, I think I'm more excited about that game than most people. I don't know why. It has that vampire vibe to it, you know?
Yeah.
And it doesn't have that it does have that Borderlands-esque, freedom looter shooter type of deal going on. So
Yeah.
I'd be down with it.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some interesting stuff, and there might even be some announcements we don't actually know about too, which will be sweet. But
True.
anyways, for Garrett Bland, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been the 80th level of the RPG Game. Only 19 levels until level 99, and we're out.
Dang. Bye.